Today I thought we'd have a look at the Masterverse Classic He-Man figure from Mattel, and let me tell you, it's beautiful. Back in the 80s and early 90s when I was a kid, I used to rush home from school just to catch He-Man and the Masters of the Universe on TV. It was probably one of my favourite cartoons at the time, and it's always held such a special place in my heart. And when I was a kid, I had so many of these figures from that range. Now, I will admit, this is a reissue. This is from Super 7. I think they brought this out a couple of years ago. I bought it from a Comic Con in Birmingham, and it is quite accurately done to the original one, but it isn't the original. My original one, his legs broke off and I threw it in the bin. But this is the best I could get. If you want to buy one of these carded now, it is quite an expensive hobby. I'm just quite happy looking at it and remembering what it was like to play with one of these at the time. But the Battle Cat is actually the original one from the 80s. The original one that I had as a child. The one I played with, putting He-Man on top and having some great adventures. Now, I also remember that when I opened these figures as a child, you got a little comic book inside as well, telling the story of He-Man, just bringing you up to speed on what the figures were all about. And then I think eventually you got the cartoon as well. It'll be interesting to see whether there's a comic book inside this box. I don't think there is, but we'll find out in a minute when I crack it open. Now, like I said, I had many of these figures, the He-Man figures, but what I really wanted was Castle Grayskull. And I remember my mother said she'd get it me for Christmas. Come Christmas morning, there was a big box under the tree. I was very excited. I thought, what else can this be? It's got to be Castle Grayskull. So I rip it open, I open it up, and it's Mumra's Castle from Thundercats. I enjoyed that toy a lot, but it wasn't Castle Grayskull. And to this day, it still stings. So let's move on to the actual figure. This is the classic line. Mattel release one of these every now and again, and every single time I fail to pick one up, and every time I go over to the internet and get myself one, they always seem to be astronomical in price. But this time I made sure I was one of the first in line to get hold of it. I actually ordered it off Amazon and they told me it would come in a month or two, and it actually came about 3 days later, which I was very made up about. Now, the first thing I noticed about this is how attractive the packaging is. I'm not a mint in box collector, as you can see, but there is something about this packaging. It's beautiful, and I was tempted to keep it in its packaging. I won't be doing, I'll be cracking it open today, but it is very tempting. The artwork on this is beautiful. I'll show you a close-up of this in a moment. And I'm thinking of actually buying myself another one just so I can display this next to it, because the artwork, the box, everything about it, I just love. So before we go any further, let's bring that camera forward and crack this open. Okay, because I'm a complete idiot, when I recorded this part of the video, I actually forgot to plug my microphone into my camera and I didn't capture any of the audio, but obviously I can't open the figure again, so I'm going to just kind of walk you through what I was saying at the time. Now, as you can see, it's got the original Masters of the Universe logo from the 80s. It's got the 40-year anniversary sticker in the top left-hand corner, and this, like I said before, this box is just beautiful, and then on the top it's got the Masterverse logo. And it all looks very retro, all looks very 80s, and I absolutely love that about it. And then when we turn the box over to the back, we've actually got this beautiful piece of artwork. As you can see, he's holding his trusty axe, he's got his shield in his other hand, there's Battle Cat, Castle Grayskull in the top corner, and I didn't notice this the first time, but Skeletor is actually hiding there in the bottom right hand corner. And this piece of art is just amazing. It really does take me back to the original artwork on the original Masters of the Universe boxes. Really, really top quality. I would like to have this framed actually. It's really, really nice. Okay, this is a part where I open up the box, which was really painful to do. I don't know if I mentioned yet, but I like the packaging on this box. I am going to get myself another one to display next to the open one. But here we go, I'm opening it up, and the first thing I can tell you is there is actually no mini comic book inside, which is a shame, but I'm not overly upset about it. But it would have been a nice inclusion. As you can see, as we get the figure out, it is very reminiscent of the original 1980s figure, which is what they were going for. I like how the sword and the axe are just as they were on the 1980s figure. They're not very well detailed, paint-wise that is. They're just a bland grey colour, and that's how they were on the old figure. And I kind of like that they've done that on the newer figure as well. back in the 80s, a lot of the weapons that came with the figures didn't really have much of a paint job, but they were quite well detailed when you held them close. A little bit like the Ninja Turtles weapons, they were quite well detailed, but they didn't have a paint job, they were all brown plastic. Now, the first thing I noticed when I got this figure out of the box is the heft to it. It really does feel really good quality and well put together, and you can just feel by holding it that this figure isn't going to break on you. The joints are all really strong and stiff, but not stiff enough to actually break. It's really, really well articulated. It's got articulation in the legs, it's got the thigh pivot, it's got articulation in the ankles, it's got articulation in the wrists, the arms, it's got some kind of ab crunch as well, and the neck is really well articulated. And like I said, it just feels like quality. You just know that this figure has been made with some real love and attention. As I said before, this figure is beautiful. It's really well detailed, but at the same time keeping that classic style. The face is very, very reminiscent of the original He-Man figure, and when I first saw it in the box, I didn't like it, but for some reason out of the box, I'm liking it a whole lot more. I've fallen in love with it. I absolutely think it's great. I think the face sculpt on this is absolutely perfect. And if you look at the original figure, you can kind of see what they were going for there. And here we have him from the back, and like I said before, he's just perfect. Everything about this figure is so good. I am so glad I've actually got him in my collection at last. Today I thought we'd take a look at the Masterverse, Masters of the Universe Revelation He-Man figure from Mattel. This figure is based on the 2021 Netflix series produced by Kevin Smith, which was kind of a continuation of the 1983 He-Man series, the series that I used to watch as a child. I remember absolutely loving He-Man as a child. As I've mentioned on a previous video, I would run home from school just to get in front of the TV in time to watch it. I also had the VHS tapes as well to tide me over when it wasn't on the television. Now, as I'm sure you know, this series was not met with praise. In fact, the internet was furious, but when is the internet not furious? A lot of people didn't like the fact that He-Man was hardly in it. I was one of them. I wanted to see He-Man return, and it turned out to be more of a Teela story rather than a He-Man story. And it kind of disappointed me a little bit because, like I said, all I wanted to see was He-Man. And the story seemed to revolve around Teela and the side characters rather than He-Man himself. Saying that, in hindsight, even though I was disappointed, it's not a bad series and I did enjoy it. I wish there was more He-Man in it, of course. If you're going to make a cartoon about He-Man, He-Man should be in it. But the second run of episodes were a lot better and you did see a little bit more of He-Man, but it still felt a little bit lackluster. But for what it was, I did enjoy it. But we're not here to talk about the series today, we're here to talk about the figure that is from the series. So let's get into it. Now, the first thing we'll look at is the packaging, which for some reason, to me, isn't as attractive as the 40-year anniversary figure I just reviewed recently, although it is very similar. So down at the bottom here, we've got Masters of the Universe Revelation He-Man, made by Mattel, little Netflix sticker there, and then we've got the Masterverse logo on the top. The figure comes nicely presented in this package here, not as nice as a 40-year anniversary figure, which was in a battle pose. And then we've got some nice artwork on the side here of He-Man. He's very reminiscent of the 1980s He-Man, because like I said, this is a continuation of that cartoon. And then we've got this nice artwork at the back as well, with the other figures that are available in the line: He-Man, Mossman, Skeletor and Evil Lyn. I tend to only go for the He-Man figures. I am toying with the idea of getting a Skeletor as well. Now, I feel like I'm comparing this figure to the 40-year anniversary He-Man figure, which I reviewed last time, but I can't help but do that because that figure was just so beautiful and the artwork on the box was so beautiful. This is as well, but to me the 40-year anniversary box art was even better, but this is still very nice. Okay, let's crack this open. As you know, I'm not a mint in-box collector. I like to have my action figures displayed, and there he is. And here we've got the sword of, nearly call it the sword of omens then. We've got He-Man's sword here, and let's see if I can get some focus on that. There we go. And Unlike the 40th anniversary figure, which was just painted, it was detailed but it was just painted grey, this one has got a lot more detail in the paintwork. As you can see, it's got this darker shade of grey, this lighter shade of grey, and the brown for the handle. Like I said, on the 40-year anniversary figure, it was mimicking the 1980s figure that was released, where all the weapons were bland and grey. But this one, they've gone the other way, and I really do like it. I think it is very, very nice. And next we've got He-Man's shield, which has this orange colour, the grey colour around the edges. It's very reminiscent of the 40-year anniversary figure, which I reviewed last time. I like it. And then we've got two grasping hands. And now let's have a look at the figure, and the first thing I notice is that it is very, very good quality. He looks a lot like the classic version of He-Man. Got these very nice gauntlets here as well, which the detail isn't fantastic on them, but I do like it. He's got plenty of articulation, plenty. He's got boot articulation, ankle articulation, knee articulation. He's got a thigh swivel. He's got this ab crunch thing going on. His head pivots all the way around, up and down. His wrists pivot, elbow pivot. Everywhere this guy is articulated. He's fantastic. You could probably get this guy in some really good poses, which we'll be having a look at soon. Now, what I did just discover when I was trying to put his sword in his hand is that I needed to change the hands around with the ones that came in the packaging. And I will say this, compared to some figures which are very stiff when you're trying to change the hands around and you feel like you're going to break them, this was surprisingly easy to remove, and they were easy to put back on. It was quite pleasant actually, compared to some figures I've had. And so the sword should now just go into his hand, and one thing I've just noticed is the wrist guard has come off, so I'm gonna have to just pop this wrist back off. You see what I mean? Very easy. Put the wrist guard back on, the gauntlet I should say, and then pop his wrist back on. Very easy to do, not stiff at all, not hard, very easy. Okay, I feel like I'm going back and forth a little bit now, but what I've just discovered is if you want to put his shield on, you have to take the gauntlet off and then slip the hand into the shield. This is the easiest way I found it, and then pop the wrist into the shield, and that was pretty simple. And now we've got a side-by-side comparison of the 40-year anniversary He-Man classic figure. If you were to ask me which one I prefer, of course, I'm going to say this one. Whether that's down to nostalgic reasons or not, I don't know, but when I look at them both, I think this one is the better figure. That's not to say that this one isn't a nice figure, but there are a few things I don't quite like about it. Firstly, the skin tone I think looks slightly off. He looks jaundiced. The detail though is very good. I like the boots, I like the shorts, I like the emblem. I like the face sculpt as well. I think they did a very good face sculpt on this figure. It is really good. And then we've got the attention to detail when it comes to the weaponry. And as you can see between the two, they have paid homage to the original He-Man character from the cartoon in this figure as well. They've just changed it ever so slightly. I think he is a little bit more slender as well, where this guy looks more like an Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of caricature. Today I thought we'd take a look at the Masters of the Universe Revelation Skeletor action figure. Now, when I was a kid, I had quite a selection of He-Man action figures, but one figure I didn't have was his main villain, Skeletor. And this was mainly because my mother had actually bought me the wrong toy, thinking it was Skeletor. She'd actually bought me Mumra from Thundercats. So for the longest time, I had He-Man fighting Mumra, pretending it was Skeletor. So buying myself this Skeletor figure in 2023 is in a strange way like me buying it for myself when I was younger. I can't wait to crack it open, so let's do that now. And here he is, and the first thing you might have noticed is that he isn't the classic Skeletor version from the 1983 cartoon. He's actually a version from the Netflix movie by Kevin Smith, which I did quite enjoy. It got quite a lot of flack, but I thought it was alright. I thought it was pretty good. I wish there was a little bit more He-Man in it, but for what it was, I enjoyed it, and I was just glad to see the original characters return back to, you know, the TV screens. it is in a way a version of the original He-Man Skeletor, but reimagined for the Netflix series, and I really like it. Accessory wise, you get these two hands, which are quite cool, and you get these two staffs. I think this one belonged to the sorceress in the movie. I'm not really bothered about that one. Skeletor staff is the one I'm bothered about. And here he is closer up, and I really cannot express how much I really do like this figure, especially the staff. I think the staff is absolutely fantastic, and you can actually change the hand and have him holding it with a different hand, which I think actually looks better, and we're gonna change that right now. And as you can see, the sculpt work on these hands are a lot better, and I think it just makes the figure come alive a little bit more just with the inclusion of these hands, because as you can see, they look a hell of a lot better than the ones that were included on the figure. If we bring the figure forward a little bit, you can see the detail on the skull is very, very nice. If I turn it around into the light, you can see it from every angle. And his actual armour that he's got on, I really like. I think it looks really good. He's got these strange shapes around his wrist. It looks like some kind of gauntlet. I can't remember them from the series. I don't know if they were a different colour and they've been painted incorrectly. I'll have to check that out, and if so, I'll add a spot of paint myself and change them. And he's actually got a cloth cape, and I think that is really nice. I've said it in my other reviews, the inclusion of a cloth cape is always a bonus for me. So considering this is my very first Skeletor figure and I've been wanting one since I was a little boy, I am over the moon with it. I really do like it, and I can't wait to stand him next to He-Man. Today I thought we'd take a look at this Masterverse He-Man figure from the new Eternia line. Now, when I first started collecting the Masters of the Universe figures, I told myself I was only going to go for He-Man figures. I weren't going to go for any of the side characters, and I weren't going to go for any of the strange variations of He-Man. I was just going to go for the traditional classic He-Man look. Originally, I weren't even going to go for the Netflix version, but it was more in line with the classic look than anything else. I went for it anyway, and I do actually like this figure. But this one kept catching my eye, and I weren't quite sure why. There was something appealing about it, there was something very familiar about it. So I did my research, and I discovered that this is actually based on the concept art for this original figure. It's based on a figure that they designed before they actually decided to settle on this He-Man figure. I'll put a picture up on the screen of the original concept art for the He-Man figure and the actual figure that they designed themselves. And because of this reason, because this figure is based off that concept design, I had to have it, because I think it fits in quite well now. I've got the original classic look He-Man figures here on my shelf, and I've also got this reimagination of the classic concept line. So without further ado, let's crack it open.
My magic sword and said, by the power of Grayskull.
So before we look at the actual figure, we're going to have a look at the accessories that came with it, and we have two hands. Two extra hands, and we have a variant head which looks more like your classic He-Man style, which I quite like that they included that. But I think for me, I'm going to be keeping this head on because it looks more like the prototype that they came out with before they made the first figure, and that is the whole reason why I bought it. So the other accessories that came with this figure are actually on the figure. You get the dagger which goes in his boot. You also get the classic He-Man sword, and you get his battle axe, which I think looks really cool on this figure, and it was included in the original prototype for the original figure, which this is based on. I'll put a picture up next to it again so you can just see the comparisons. As you can see, the helmet is an exact match for the prototype figure as well. The stones are even the same colour. And they've took a few liberties here and there by adding on these pieces of armour, which obviously enhance the figure and make it look better. So as you can see in the promo image there, this figure has definitely took liberties from that prototype action figure that they designed way back in 1981. The prototype action figure, I believe, was designed without any moving parts. It was just to show Mattel what they could actually do and what they were planning, and then they took that design and they built on it, and then we finally got the He-Man that we know and love today, the action figure that was actually released in, I think it was 1983. And there he is with the alternative head, and I kind of like it. I think it looks quite good, but I am going to display him with this Viking head. One thing I have just noticed that if you wish to, you could remove these armour pieces here on top and have a classic looking He-Man figure with a little bit of a difference compared to the other figures. For example, the boots will be different and the loincloth around his waist will be different. Let's have a go at that now. And there you go, just like that, out of this figure you've got a classic looking He-Man figure. And the details are actually quite different to the other ones out there. The details on the boots, the sculpt is different. The loincloth is different, and the actual harness around his chest is different, including the gauntlets around his wrists as well. They're actually different. I'll just put the other figures next to him so you can actually see how different it actually is. There we go. And you know what? It's actually making me think that I should get another one of these figures so I can have the helmet version with the armor and this version as well, because I think that is a very cool version of He-Man to have in your collection. I actually do like that classic look to it, and now I'm torn over which one I'm going to display. I think I am still going to go for the prototype look, and I might actually see if I can pick another one of these up and display it like this, because I think that looks quite cool. And here he is assembled how he was actually meant to be, and I really do like this figure. I've got to say, it is a beast of a figure. The sculpt work on it is really good. I would say possibly better than all of the other action figures that they brought out of He-Man so far. And it is really giving me like Conan the Barbarian vibes, and I believe that is what the artist was going for when he was creating He-Man. So it kind of fits. So yeah, I recommend this figure highly. I think it is really good, and I picked it up at a really cheap price because not a lot of people seem to want it for some reason. And if you can get it at a bargain price, I definitely recommend you do.